My name is Gomanga. I'm 17 medical student at the University of Zambia. I have a bachelor's degree in human biology. I am the founder also of We Rise Zambia, which is a mental health and disability awareness organization. Um, yes, I am also quite passionate about education in the girl child. Yeah, I think that's all about me. So I can go ahead with presenting the presentation. So menstruation, I think that's something that you looked at yesterday, the cycle, what menstruation is about. Hopefully you also looked at the female reproductive organs. So you looked at the anatomy of the female pelvis from outside the vagina to the cervix, which is the door of the uterus, up to the uterus, and then the fallopian tubes and the ovary. So I'm just giving you just a little recap on what you should have learned yesterday. So Bunda, just go into it and define what menstruation is. So it is a natural bodily process of releasing blood and associated matter from the uterus, like what I said, through the vagina as part of the menstrual cycle. Now, menstrual hygiene management. What is menstrual hygiene management? So menstrual hygiene management refers to the management of hygiene associated now with this whole menstrual process. Or you can say menstrual hygiene management is when women and adolescent girls are using a clean menstrual management material, which will go into it, to collect the menstrual blood that we looked at, that can be changed in privacy as often as necessary for the duration of a menstrual period, using soap and water for washing the body as required, and having access to safe and convenient facilities to dispose of the use of menstrual management and materials. So understanding what the management consists of and what menstruation consists of will help us as we discuss menstrual hygiene. So menstrual health hygiene now has to deal with the menstrual health management, which I talked about, having a place to dispose your materials that you use, the water, the place where you change, that's under mental health management, mental health and hygiene. So mental health management will be under the menstrual health hygiene. And it will also have a broader systemic factors that link menstruation with health, such as the well-being, gender equality, education, equity, empowerment, and rights. I hope we're together here with the definitions. So now let's look at the introduction. What is menstrual health hygiene? Why are we so concerned about menstrual health hygiene? Why don't we care about other things, but why are we concerned about this specifically? Well, globally, we have approximately 52% of the female population being in their reproductive age. Now, of these women, girls will menstruate every month for about 2 to 7 days. Now, in most parts of the world, this whole menstruation topic is a taboo and it is rarely talked about. So currently, cultural practices and taboos around menstruation impact negatively on the lives of women and girls and reinforce gender inequalities and exclusions. We are fighting for equality. We are fighting for opportunities. We are fighting to be included as women. But there are certain things that naturally we have, like menstruation, that pushes us again backwards, like 10 steps backwards. So we want to work on this by spreading the message. So what is UNICEF doing? So UNICEF works to improve girls and women's menstrual health and hygiene in 4 areas. Like I said, women are disadvantaged in so many ways. But then with this, again, menstrual period that we have, which is naturally, we are disadvantaged even more. But UNICEF has come about with 4 areas that will help improve menstrual health and menstrual hygiene. So that's the social support, knowledge and skills, like what we are doing right now, we are learning, facilities and services, so allowing places for women to go and change their pads, like clean toilets and stuff like that. And we have access to absorbent materials, so such like pads, which we'll see and which you learned about yesterday. So what does social support consist of? So basically, it's just beliefs, discriminatory attitudes. We want to remove all of that from menstruation. And that's why we learn about it. That's why we are here. So it is not shameful and it shouldn't be an embarrassment for people to have their menses. So as we grow up or when we were younger as girls, there's this embarrassment that kind of comes about, this fear that comes about when you start your menses because of all the stories that you hear. People shouldn't be scared to be a woman. People shouldn't be scared to go through what women are supposed to go through. So that social support needs to be amplified when it comes to menstrual health and menstrual hygiene awareness. We have knowledge and skill also as one of the UNICEF goals, which I'm just going to talk through. So many girls reach their first period, which is called menarche, without the information that is needed. So I have had the chance to grow up in different places. I grew up in Edinburgh, Scotland. So there we were told a lot about periods. But like when you come to places where the culture is so engraved in people, we have places where people don't even talk much about periods. For example, if a single dad in Zambia is raising children, most of the times those children don't know much about periods. You know, it's something that you can't even talk about in the house. Men fear to talk about those things in the house. So if maybe an auntie does not tell them, or if they don't learn at school, they do not have information. So the information may come too late after a girl has already had her first period, or not at all due to taboos around puberty, education linked to sexual and reproductive health. Therefore, they reach menarche, which is their first period, without understanding the normal biology and menstrual cycle. And the opportunities to learn and skills to safety and privately manage menstruation are usually not there. So that's what's under knowledge and skills. So teachers, parents, and traditional leaders have a similar need for accurate information. So the same way as the girl child needs information about her first period, so does the dad. Men that are here need to know about the first period. We shouldn't shun, or men shouldn't shun away about learning about periods. This is a role as a father that you should know, or even as a brother that you should know that this might happen, or this will happen to my daughter, or this will happen to my sister. So I need to know a little bit about it. So you have facilities and services. We have people who are in the villages, people who are at school, who lack water, toilets, and disposal of mechanisms. This is something that we are really lacking in Zambia. I think this is the biggest when it comes to menstrual hygiene in Zambia. Water to flush toilets. You know, as a woman, I'm sure this group is mostly men. So it's really hard to be on your period. You need to pee, but the water is bloody and you need to go and fetch water, come back to flush the toilet. You need to find a toilet that is clean. Also, now where are you going to dispose of that pad? We still have problems with that in Zambia. I can also tell you at UNZA, we still have a problem where sometimes they're not even pad bins. You're like, where am I going to dispose of this pad now? So this is something that still needs to be fought for here in Zambia. We can't be moving around with pads in our bags the whole day because there's no place to dispose of it. So knowing about this is also very important when it comes to mental health management. Sorry, not mental health, menstrual management. Yes. So now we come to materials. So there are 4 things under UNICEF is looking at, like I alluded earlier, when it comes to menstrual hygiene. So I said the social, the facilities, the skills, and the knowledge. Now we're going to the materials. So there needs to be access to high quality materials. This is something also that you would think is not a lot in Zambia, is not a lot in a lot of these African countries because you don't know. But it is so bad that a lot of people, even at the hospital where I work, sometimes in the clinic, people will be coming with cloths that are, you can even say that, okay, this cloth is a little bit dirty. She just has one cloth. She needs to go and wash it. There's just blood everywhere because she's using a cloth and, she doesn't have a lot of money. So we start improvising there at the hospital at UTH. Say, no, let's do this. Let's cut this. Let's cut this. You see it. I never ever met someone who uses a cloth before going to the hospital at UTH, before going upstairs, obs and gyne. But once you go to the obs and gyne ward, you start to see that, oh my goodness, people don't have access to fresh pads. They don't have access to a lot of things. Some people will just be bleeding, free bleeding, if you understand a free. And that's what a lot of people used to use a long time ago. Sometimes in huts, in houses, they'll lock you up and you just free bleed because they didn't have any of this or any access to materials. And that's what UNICEF is trying to bring about, to have females have access to these menstrual materials. So what are the common menstrual hygiene practices out there? What do people use? I'm going to talk about materials, which is under the common menstrual hygiene practices that a lot of people should know about and should know also their health, like how they impact our health. So number 1, I'm going to talk about the menstrual cloth. So the menstrual cloth is very common in Zambia. Like I said, when you go up to obs and gyne, you will be able to see that there are a lot of people who actually just use the menstrual cloth alone. Now, these cloths are usually reusable pieces of fabric. What I noticed in Zambia is it's not like how here they say is a specific fabric, maybe use the different color. No, usually they just cut a little square of their chitenge. Then they fold their chitenge so that it's more like thick enough like a pad, and that's what they use. They wash that chitenge, they hang it up. Now, the chitenge, up to now, we don't know if that's a right way to use it, because even when you wash your chitenge material, you know that sometimes there's some ink, some dye that comes out. So there are some cons to using chitenges or to using materials. So compared to reusable pads, cloth is often not recommended for menstrual hygiene management, as their use has been associated with abnormal vaginal discharge. So abnormal vaginal discharge can be anything from white, from watery, from thick, from viscoid discharge. So it has been noted that a lot of people who use these tenges have a lot of discharge. And you don't know, usually discharge is the way where the vagina is just trying to flush out whatever may be entering, because that's basically one of the roles of the vagina. It tries to self-clean itself. So if anything enters, you will now start noticing that maybe there'll be a discharge or something. So these little chitenge materials that a lot of people started using, they started to be associated with this abnormal vaginal discharge. Also skin irritations. There are different types of chitenges that are used. You wash them in what in some people go and wash them in boom. They wash them in a lot of boom. They don't rinse them. Maybe they hang them on the line. Then they put them back again down there. Now, a lot of those things, the disinfectants, the whatever, they cause skin irritations to the external genitalia. Next, there are reusable pads. These are a type of material that is used for menstrual hygiene purposes. So your reusable pads are worn externally to the body in the underwear to absorb menstrual flow and are held in place usually by snaps. So reusable pads are basically like is it Vitevela? Like those diapers for children that you can wash and put up. Those are kind of how the reusable pads are. They are made from a variety of natural or synthetic materials. So there are some which you can buy from shops that are more like pad-like, diaper-like, but these are made from natural, or they are manufacturally made compared to the cloth. So the reusable pads are usually made to mimic a pad, but you can reuse it a lot of times. Yeah. So the health impact of these same reusable pads, but are not that much. They're very minimal. So there is very little evidence of health impacts of reusable pads. However, they might be associated to urinary tract infections and bacterial vaginosis. You know, when you wash something like a reusable pad and hang it up, the area, the female genitalia, the vulva down there in between the legs, is supposed to be dry. You know, bacteria likes to grow in damp places. So once something is damp, for example, your reusable pad, your cloth, it hasn't dried properly because maybe you only have two, but you've messed up and you need to change, it will lead to skin irritations, and it might actually give you a UTI. It can even give you bacterial vaginosis. So you have to be very, very careful when it comes to using reusable pads. And this should also come even with your underwear. Your underwear should be something that should be dry, clean, as people place their cloth, as people place their reusable pads. It should be on a clean and dry underwear that has probably been out in the sun to dry. So now we're going to move on to the disposable sanitary pads. These are the ones that are very common, and these are the ones that are very, they are not affordable for a lot of people, especially Africa, where it's still a developing world, where a majority of the people are in rural areas rather than urban areas. But they are they work the best because after you take them out, you throw them. So they consist of a layered design made out of blends of plastics, rayon, and cotton. I'm sure you learned of that yesterday. So what are the health impacts now of using this disposable pad compared to the cloth, compared to the reusable pad? So there are no significant adverse effects of using these disposable pads. But however, there is evidence.
Okay, so we're just gonna wait for Chipego to join us again. I think she has left the meeting. Might be the internet connection, but please feel free to participate and tell us what's going on. Are you people able to understand what she's talking about, or it's all foreign? Okay, she's back. Chipego, you can just unmute your mic. Oh, it's okay. I'm glad. We are so glad.
So Where did I didn't even know how the network
Yeah.
has stopped. Can you see my screen?
Also, you basically talking about the health effects that disposable pads have. That was the last slide you opened. You are
Okay,
now
you can
looking
see
at
the screen?
the health impact. Not yet.
Okay, it should come. It should come. Just tell me when it comes, but I'll continue talking. So
Yes.
most of the times when it comes to, okay, thank you. When it comes to disposable pads, they are very effective. However, a lot of people in the rural areas cannot afford them. Most of the time they have their effects because people leave them on for too long. Maybe you know that your period has taken a little bit longer, but you only bought one pack of pads. So you're going to make sure that one pad will last you the whole day from morning to evening. And that's what happens sometimes to these teenagers. And that's what sometimes happens when you don't have enough money or you forget your other pad at home. You will keep the pad from morning to evening. However, these disposable pads have some chemicals inside that are not supposed to be kept like that with blood for a long time. So they're only supposed to keep these pads for about 4 to 8 hours. 8 hours should be your maximum. And it also depends on your floor. So these pads, these disposable pads can hold in an amount of blood. So if someone has a heavy floor, it can't compare to someone who has a low floor. A heavy floor, it will mean you maybe will be changing your pads every 2 to 3 hours. Now, a lot of people don't know these things and they end up keeping the pad very long and they end up being predisposed to, again, reproductive tract infections and also skin irritability. Now, even with these same disposable pads, there are different types of pads. There's Cortex, there's Always. That's why you see men when they go and buy pads in ShopRite, they're just confused. But she told me to buy Always. Now, what's the difference between Always and Cortex? They are made differently. They are composed of different materials. They have different chemicals. So women react differently to these pads. One might agree with Cortex, one might not agree with Always.
Okay. She has left us. Oh, she's back. She should be back. Okay. It's over to you.
Oh, okay. Some are less disposable. So disposable pads are well tolerated by users in different parts of the world. But like what I said, there are different ones. Some you find Cortex, you find Angel, you find the girl or the woman reacts to and does not react to. So this is the only thing I can say about the disposable pads. So far, are there any questions before I continue? No? Any questions? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Gents, feel free. If you have any questions at this point.
Yeah.
Yes, I have a question.
Feel free to. All right.
Yes, okay. I was from the back from the backside. She talked about abnormal vaginal discharge. So I just wanted to know I just wanted to understand the definition for what vaginal discharge is.
Okay, so vaginal discharge is anything that comes out of the vagina that is not associated with menstruation. Okay, so this is maybe fluid. It could be blood-stained fluid, foul-smelling fluid. It may be thick fluid, viscous fluid. So you have normal vaginal discharge that you get at different times of the month. Normal vaginal discharge should be watery. It shouldn't have a smell. It shouldn't be sticky, like really sticky. That should be the normal vaginal discharge. But then you get the abnormal vaginal discharge that might be green, that might be white, that might be cheese-like, that might have a little bit of brownish color. So that's what discharge is. So anything that's out of the menstrual cycle, and that is not blood. Yes, so that's what you can call vaginal discharge. I don't know if you've understood me.
Yes, I've understood. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So there's something called abnormal vaginal discharge and abnormal uterine bleeding. So when you bleed out of your menstrual period, abnormal uterine bleeding. But if it's not blood and if it's abnormal, then it's abnormal vaginal discharge. Okay, so we can now go to the tampon. So a tampon is something that's very
before you
common.
go,
Mhm.
Chico, there's another person
Yeah.
who has raised their hand. Maybe you can just allow them to unmute themselves so that we
Okay,
tackle the
can I-
questions at this junction. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity.
Mhm.
My question is in relation to the use of sanitary pads as compared to the use of the menstrual cup. Which one is more appropriate or more healthy between the two, and which one would you advise can be invested more in relation to maybe those who would love to be activists at some point in time and invest in providing for these issues or other materials at a very affordable price?
Okay.
Thank
I'll talk about the menstrual cup in the next slide, but I can just say something. So the menstrual cup doesn't really have a lot of adverse effects compared to the cloth or the disposable pad. You said disposable pad, right?
Yes.
Okay, so the menstrual cup does not have as a lot of adverse effects. So does the disposable pad also does not have a lot of side effects. The good thing about the menstrual cup, however, is that you don't get a lot of, sorry, I got a call. Can you hear me? Oh my
Yes.
gosh.
Yes, we can.
Sorry, my people keep calling me. Sorry, guys. I forgot to tell people I'm in a meeting. Okay. So yeah, you have a disposable, sorry, I was at the pad, menstrual cup. So the menstrual cup, usually there are pros and cons. The pros is that you don't really get a lot of irritation when it comes to the menstrual cup. So those people who are prone to having, boils, to having a lot of big ingrown hairs, to having a lot of all those things, you can use the menstrual cup compared to the pad. Both of them don't have a lot of adverse effects. Yes. But if you wanted one which is preferred, when it comes to older people, I would say use the menstrual cup because they can manage it. But when it comes to those who just have started their period, the best to use is the pad, which is a little bit easier to use than the menstrual cup. The menstrual cup needs a little bit of skill to get used to. Yeah. Any more questions? Okay, so I guess we can go now to the tampon. So tampons are absorbent materials that are made from cotton or rayon, and they're inserted into the vagina to absorb the menstrual blood flow. Remember, I told you there's a vagina, then there's like a door, which is the cervix, and then there's the uterus on top. So the uterus has all the blood that is coming from the endometrium, the endometrium is getting shared, there's blood. Then there's the door. So the door must open for that blood to come out into the vagina and to make its way out. Now, what people use is this absorbent material. They put it just there in the vagina a little bit high, so that when the door opens, that material starts to absorb the blood, and the blood does not leak out of the vagina. So everything is just being absorbed by that tampon. I would like, if you have any time, if you're at home, maybe there's a woman who uses a tampon, or just for experimental sake, you can buy one at the shop and just put it in water, and you'll see how it will expand. So as this material starts to absorb things, it starts to expand. So that's what happens in the vagina. It starts to expand and absorb all the blood. However, this tampon, I think, is probably one of the dangerous ones compared to any of them, because of one thing that I'll talk about. So a long time ago, they noticed that, okay, this is really good. You can put something up, no bleeding. You can go swimming, you can go to the gym, you can do a lot of things. The only thing you see is a string. There's nothing like, oh, maybe I have a pad, it's full or it's leaked. No. So they started to make very super absorbent pads, meaning you can wear them even the whole day, and you'll be fine. But there was a really bad outcome when it came to the super absorbent pads. And you'll see in the next slide. So super absorbent pads led to a lot of deaths. In fact, up to now, if you just go on YouTube and check toxic shock syndrome, you'll see how many girls, how many teenagers are dying because of this. And when I go home, I started to become so cautious with this. So every time I'm home, I always try to teach the girls, the females, about this. Toxic shock syndrome, however, does not just come about with pads, with tampons alone. Even just leaving your pad for too long. So there is a bacteria, Staphylococcus aureus, that loves blood. There's a bacteria that really, really loves blood. So if, for example, when putting in the pad, but this bacteria is naturally found on everyone's skin, it's just naturally found outside. So when putting that tampon inside, you may have a little bit of that bacteria on the tampon, because you start from outside going inside into the vagina. However, when you place that thing to sit there to absorb the blood, because that bacteria likes that blood, it will start multiplying, because now you've put that tampon in. And then there were those same super absorbent pads. They were like, okay, you can have them in for a longer period of time. So the longer the people had those pads in, the more of the bacteria was multiplying. So then these people, after having that pad in for a long time, would now start having symptoms of shock. The BP would just drop. They will start having fever and they will just die. So that's what used to happen. And now we still have it. It's very rare, but it is there. And unfortunately, in a country like Zambia, people wouldn't even, by the time they're diagnosing you, you're gone, you're dead. They are even forgotten. So at least in countries abroad, they'll be like, no, this is this. They'll diagnose, no, she's on her period, she's wearing a tampon. They'll quickly know where to go. But in places like Zambia, clinics in Zambia, where they'll be shocked. They won't know what is going on. So that's why with tampons, I always urge people, before you start using tampons, learn how to use tampons. You just shouldn't be going shoving things up without learning how to use tampons. And you're not supposed to keep them in for a long time. So you should be able to get the right size for you. Don't say, no, I want a bigger tampon so that I can keep it for 2 days. No. So yeah. Tampons are associated with toxic shock syndrome, which is a very fatal disease. There is usually chemical fragrance that is added again to these same tampons. Now, remember, in the pads, yes, there were chemicals that were added. You had the cortex, you have the the always that you find. But the thing is that those ones remain outside. So it's not as bad as the tampon. Tampon, there's a chemical, there's a bit of fragrance, and remember, you're putting it inside. So for this one, if you had to advise younger ones, you first have to tell them, no, learn first how to manage a pad. After you learn how to manage a pad, then you can move on to learning how to manage a tampon. Yes. And when also doing inserting the tampon, clean hygiene has to happen. You can't go in, for example, a UTH toilet or one of those UNZA toilets where there is dirt everywhere. You can't sit on the pan to go and insert a tampon. That's very dangerous. And that's why I wouldn't really advise tampons in adolescents, in younger ones, because these toilets that you see at public places, you can't go and start setting a tampon. Maybe there's poo on the seats, there's poo on the walls, the doors, the toilets are just not clean. No, I wouldn't advise, because you would just be injecting bacteria. So that's what toxic shock syndrome is that I just talked about. And now the menstrual cup that was asked about. So the menstrual cup is a non-absorbent bell. So the menstrual cup itself does not absorb compared to the tampon. What the menstrual cup does is, you know how I talked about the door? So right there at the cervix, the menstrual cup will just hold, like just a cup. When you open the tap in the kitchen, you put a cup underneath and it just collects the water. That's the same thing when it comes to your menstruation and the menstrual cup. You put the cup just at the door so that when blood starts to leak out, the menstrual cup is there to just hold the blood inside. So the menstrual cup is emptied every 6 to 12 hours. It is a very efficient product because menstrual cups can stay from 5 to 10 years. You just have one cup, which is very good. So most manufacturers have different sizes. So maybe like most of them have two actually sizes. So you can get maybe a medium one, you can get a large one, you can get a small cup depending on if you have had any children and your age. So they also come in different shapes. Yeah. After the use of a menstrual cup, you're supposed to rinse it and you're supposed to hang it upside down for it to dry. So what are the health impacts of the menstrual cup? So based on literature from high and low income countries, there are no significant health risks reported for the menstrual cup. These do not disrupt vaginal flora and pH. The health risks like toxic shock syndrome that we saw in tampons, infections, and skin irritations are very minimal. So like we saw skin irritations in the cloth, we saw skin irritations with the pads. We saw toxic shock syndrome with tampons, and we saw vaginal discharge with the cloths also. Now with the cup, it's like there are not a lot of risks that have been associated with it. So with the evidence and with everything that we've read, the most, how can I say, the best product I think which can be used is the menstrual cup. However, technique needs to be learned before you use it. The first few periods will be very uncomfortable. You might leak a bit because you don't know yet how to use it. But after that, really, you'll be fine if you know how to also keep the cup, because you don't want to have a cup, two cups, and you're keeping them in your school bag. Yeah. Any questions so far? No? Okay, so we can just go to the taboos that are there when it comes to menstruation. So in a lot of countries, in Zambia, we have them mostly in the villages, I think. I think we've really evolved as a country, which is very good. We find it really, really bad, however, in other countries where the culture is and their culture is very, is still there. Like they're very cultured. For example, in Asia, for to be specific, you have places like Afghanistan. Once you start your period, today is day one, don't go to school. You find that in Afghanistan. In Nepal, you have places where 67% of people, once you start your period, you don't go to church. You even know Mrs. Banda has not come to church this week. You start, but she comes every week. Now people even know that on the 27th, every time end of the month, last Sabbath, if you're an SDA, last month of the Sabbath, Mrs. Banda doesn't come to church. I'm just giving you an example. So in Nepal, most religious functions, you cannot go if you are on your period. And then there are also some taboos where people say, sleep in the other room if you're on your period. In Zambia, the most common one that I've come across is do not cook for anyone in the house. Do not cook for your husband. Do not cook for visitors when you're on your period. That was more that this thing came about because of the same hygiene. So it's not that they just came about and said, no, women shouldn't be cooking or what, but with what I did, the research and what my elders told me, they told me that a long time ago, the menstrual hygiene was very poor because obviously the materials didn't have facilities, water wasn't there, knowledge very low, social very low. The same four things that UNICEF are trying to work on when it comes to menstrual hygiene. So when it came to cooking and when it came to doing all that stuff, they didn't know a lot of things. People used to free bleed. People used to use cloths to bleed. There wasn't water to wash your hands. Like here where you have running water, you go to the kitchen, you wash your hands, you come and cook. There wasn't that a long time ago. So that's how those things, those cultural beliefs started seeping in. They started making news like, no, okay, since you're on your period, you stay in the bedroom. Or since you're on your period, please don't cook. Because of those things that they had low hygiene mannerisms, can I say, in those days. So you have also in places like Afghanistan, again, they believe that you're not supposed to bath on your period. There is also places like Nepal and Bengal that say that you do not play sports again on your period. There are some people who say, no, you cannot have sex when you're on your period. So those were beliefs that came about because, again, they didn't understand. Their knowledge was very low. So even all these things, all these taboos, they are not real. Like all these things they put in place, like little stories they used to tell us, no, you can't have sex. You can have sex on your period. No, you can't play with guys on your period. No, you can't play with guys on your period. Other people also said, no, you can't have sex because you will you can have sex on your period because you won't get pregnant. That's also a myth, but sometimes you do get pregnant. So those are little things that have to be taken away, the taboos that have to be abolished, because these came about because people had lack of knowledge. And now also we have evolved when it comes to our sanitation. We have toilets, we have water, we have all these things. So all these things can be worked on through awareness. And next we have now the consequences of poor menstrual hygiene. So what happens when when women do not keep themselves well? What happens to the society? What happens to us? What happens to people around? This is the same thing that brought about those same taboos. So those same taboos came about because of the same consequences of poor menstrual hygiene. I'm sure in those days, maybe people knew what toxic shock syndrome was. They just didn't know how it came about. So that's why they started saying, no, you shouldn't cook. No, you shouldn't do this. And then also wiping from back to front. So this is now poor menstrual hygiene management. The same way you clean yourself also matters. So if you don't know how to clean yourself when one is on their period, what happens is they are more liable to infection. So, for example, there's a technique you need to use to wipe. You go to the bathroom, you defecate, and then also you're on your period. Or you just want to wipe yourself because there's blood. What you need to teach the females is never wipe from bottom to front. You should always wipe from front to bottom. Why? It's because if you're going to wipe from bottom to front, you are bringing all that bacteria back up into the vagina, which is also not good because you are liable to infection, the same discharge, all those things. The next one is unprotected sex. So during your period or whatever, you are at a very what can I say? Your vagina epithelium, okay, is that's why you find a lot of HIV more in female. If you do your research, you find HIV mostly in female than in male because our epithelium is it is very delicate. And you know, HIV is like a small bacteria that can just move. It's like move through the skin barriers that have been cut or that have been destroyed. So unprotected sex during your period has been led to have an increase in the risk of sexually transmitted diseases. Also, the transmission of HIV and hepatitis B during menstruation. That it has been seen. So also unsafe disposal of used sanitary materials risk others from getting hepatitis B. HIV and other blood hepatitis viruses, however, do not survive for long outside the body. So most of the time, you can't really get like HIV um, from a pad, but you will or you can get hepatitis B. And that's why sometimes, even there was a time I went to someone's place and she was like, no, you can dispose your pad in the kitchen bin. I was shocked. I was like, I have never, ever, ever had an opportunity or had a chance to see someone put a pad in the kitchen bin. Because if you understand what blood has and what bacteria like eating blood or like growing on blood, you know that pads cannot be thrown in a kitchen bin. It will be increase the risk of people getting hepatitis B. So that's a very risky thing. Even just the same toxic shock syndrome, it can be gotten just like that from even a child. Bad disposal of sanitary pads, very bad. So what you'd advise children or whoever is to wrap those pads, wrap them nicely, throw them in a bin that is even far away, or burn them, or put them in a bin that is going to be thrown outside. If there's a bin that maybe the bin man comes, or even washing them is better than going to throw them in the communal kitchen bin, which is not very good. Yeah. So I think that's it. So we ended at the consequence of poor menstrual hygiene. Do we have any questions so far?
Yes, we actually do have a lot of questions in the
A
chat.
lot.
I'm gonna just pick some. Yeah, people
Okay.
like they just need clarification. They are
Okay.
really eager to learn more. So there's one person is asking, Peter is asking, does it mean there are no treatment here in Zambia for the same bacteria syndrome disease?
Okay.
And then there's a question.
Okay.
I don't know if I can read or I go one by one. I
Okay,
read
let
them
me
all
just
or
write
you.
them down.
Oh, okay.
You
You
can
can
read them
actually access
all.
the chat. Yeah. You can use the chat.
Um,
Okay. No, let's do it one
okay,
question
so
at a time. So Peter wants
okay.
clarity to say, is there no treatment here for in Zambia for the same bacteria syndrome disease?
There is a treatment, however, because it's very rare, it's hard for people to spot it. If you understand, someone will just go with very low BP, with fevers, or will just be at home. You know, it's a very rare disease and it happens so fast that you die in hours. So you know how bad the system is in Zambia. Um, it's like more like you can even compare to meningitis. In fact, meningitis, it will even start with a headache and stuff like that. But this one is very, very fast. That by the time you've made it to UTH and by the time they are checking what it is, you're gone. If you understand, but there's treatment for it. The next question?
Yes. The next question is the question is really, can you have sex during periods? So it kindly just wants to highlight the issue of having sex while one is on their menses, and then do they need to do what do they need to do really before getting into the act?
I wouldn't advise sex during your period because, you know, the body, the natural physiology, what's going on with the vagina and the uterus is it's a cleansing act that is going on. So your uterus is the endometrium is scraping off. It's like a cleansing act of the body. So when you're having sex, there's no proven cons to having sex. But because of just the fact that the body is cleansing itself, it's best that you just wait. And then there's blood associated with that. So anything from the male genitalia, you know, sometimes men, maybe they haven't bathed. I'm just saying, I'm not saying you haven't bathed. They haven't bathed, they haven't cleaned themselves. They now insert and then put bacteria in there. The bacteria will be so happy because there's food, there's blood, they'll multiply in there. So really, you can have sex, but I would advise not to. But there's nothing wrong with having sex during your period. Yeah. And then the next one.
So the question is actually being said, can bacteria be transmitted through sexual contact to a man?
To a man? Yes. Because
Yeah,
that's
like
blood.
per se, I don't know which kind of, okay.
Mm-hmm. So, for example, you are a man and then that's blood. Remember that menstruation, that blood that comes out, there's hepatitis B, even HIV. There are a lot of things. So when you're having sex and there's proper contact there with blood, you have a cut, for example, on your penile shaft, and you go inside and you insert, it's basically blood is, there's going to be some sort of exchange through your skin barrier. So you are at the risk of getting whatever hepatitis B even there. Yeah, any other questions? The next question.
Okay, that's about the questions. They are all done. I think we can proceed to the next session.
Okay, so yeah, that was the end of my PowerPoint. That was everything that I had put down for this presentation. I don't know if I've missed anything that I was supposed to talk about.
No, you touched on every area that was really needed to be covered, and thank you so much. You have done an exceptional work. The men are excited, and I believe they have learned a lot. I don't know if you guys would want to ask or clarify anything before we end today's meeting. Don't feel shy. Unmute yourselves. Let the incoming doctor answer them so that you don't go around and allow your friends to tell you lies.
I actually have a question. Yes, yes, you've talked about having sex during periods, during when a woman is
Mhm,
it, in her period. Um,
mhm.
okay, just the experience that women go through, like the pain, some in the stomach, head. So with that kind of pain, also, can
Mhm.
that is that really good to have sex during periods because
Okay.
they get a lot of
Mhm.
pain? Yes.
So every woman is different. That's something I can tell you. Every woman is different. There are some women who actually are very, very, very aroused by sex during menstruation. That if you just notice, if you have a girlfriend or if you've dated multiple females, that those females are very clingy during menstruation. There are those people who have that natural urge for it during menstruation. Then there are those who do not like that during menstruation, maybe probably those who have major cramps, major whatever. But then again, there are those who actually enjoy, like majority, like even when I was going through, we sit as girls, we talk about these things and we try to find out what really you feel during your menstruation. I remember my older sister is married, but she did tell me one time that, oh, during my menstrual period, that's like all I want. So I don't know if that has helped answer your question, but it depends on the person. Some people don't have the urge for it during menstruation. Some people really do. It's like pregnancy. During pregnancy, whole 9 months, maybe someone want to be doing twice a day, while others during pregnancy, the whole 9 months, they don't want. Yes, so it depends on the person.
All right, thank you very much. I've gotten the concept because I've heard many complain about it because I'm working with females, only females where I work. So
Mm-hmm.
it's more like we've created that rapport. So there's a conversation that goes on. No, shiny, shiny. Me, I'm on my period. So Fide Kadipa, I can't move. I can't do this. So it's more like a number of them have complained about having a lot of pain. So I didn't know that quite one hour was pain. Okay, thank you very
Okay.
much.
I hope I've helped. You're welcome.
Okay, so there's more questions for you in the chat, which is it true that period changes are giving birth and the pain completely goes? Like
Yes,
people who
there
usually
are
have
some. Yes, there are some changes. Some people their period gets lighter. Some people their period gets heavier. Some people, all those pain they used to have before pregnancy goes. Some people they're exacerbated. I can give you example. We are a house of females. When my older sister, um, when my older sister had her first child, she used to have bad premenstrual vomiting. She couldn't go to school. She would lie down screaming. But after she had her first child, all of that stopped. However, my immediate older sister, when she had her baby, we even used to say, she's the lucky one. This one doesn't even bleed. Now, when she had her baby, she started having heavy bleeding. So, like that, it's different from for people again. But there are some menstrual changes that take place, and sometimes they are not. Mhm. I hope I've answered
okay,
your
so
question.
there's another
Mm-hmm.
you didn't ask. So there's another question here. People are eager to learn. There's I've heard that having sex regularly helps a lady to have smooth flow of period and it reduces menstrual cramps. How true is that?
For that one, I am not sure. I can lie on that one for having regular sex reduces cramps. That one I don't know. I can lie. Yes. Any other questions?
in the chat they are done. I think if there are any other questions, you guys can feel free and meet yourselves and ask away. Since we have come to the end of the presentation, she's done with the presentation. So this is the chance, guys, to really ask all those questions.
Okay.
Okay, since there are no questions, let's just thank our student doctor. Thank you so much for coming through for us and availing yourself when we really needed someone to guide our men to understand. And I feel like the best person that really can explain a woman's sexual health is actually a woman herself who has gone through the experience. So I believe there's a lot of thank you, Doc, in the chat box. People are really excited. So thank you very much, our student doctor, for coming in, and we look forward to having you more on these different sessions so that you can really help us in educating our men as well, even our women. So we are so grateful that you took time to come, and the session was powerful. I can really see, because of how curious everyone was and how they were asking a lot of questions. Yeah. So I don't know if Brian is still here, if he can just help us say something, since he's an advocate for to say men are gonna do extra work with the information. So Brian, let's hear what you're going to say and how your experience has been so far.
Yeah, thank you so much for this, and I've been following, and I think one thing I love is the participation. I want to commend everyone. I love how we are participating. I love how we are asking questions. I love how we are actually freely bringing out what we have on the table. I think this is what we should do. And as a man, I keep saying this. Let's show them that we are actually better, stewards and advocates of these issues that most of the people think that we are so negative about. And so, to our doctor, thank you so much. Big ups. It was wonderful. The information was flowing so nice, and it was on point. And not forgetting you, Judith. Thank you so very much as well. Your negative notions towards us men, thinking we cannot do this, whatnot, is actually pushing us. And you've actually seen that the men are even doing better than you, Judith. So we will not disappoint you. We will actually do a great job. Like yesterday's session was, don't always forget to pray when you're menstruating so that it takes away your anger issues and stuff like that. Don't expect apples and bananas from us, man. I sign out. Thank you so much, and good night, everybody.
Thank
All right,
you.
thank you so much. I don't know what we are going to do, Dr. Chipego. I've heard the men will now be praying for us. They're not buying things. All right, thank you so much, everyone, and have a blessed night. You guys can feel free to log out.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Good night, everyone.